everyone. Good evening, PAC. Good evening, members of the public. Welcome. And I'll call for a motion to approve the agenda unless there are some amendments and additions to be made, in which case we'll move to approve them. Roll call. I'm sorry.
Mayor Benedict Lima, Center Regrets. Todd Bennett.
He's here.
Eric Bergeron.
Here.
Maurice Dupel.
He's here as well.
Sid Gardner.
Here.
Glenn Grant.
Here.
Caroline Hébert. Is out. Dean Hollingsworth.
Present.
William McDonald.
Present.
Claude McIntosh. Justin Towndale.
Present.
Amanda Brisson.
Here.
And Ron Simonton.
Here.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any additions or amendments to the agenda? I believe there's one addition. You don't have this page in your book, but it's at your place. It's the report for one of the CPAG items, the first one, I believe. So with that noted, could I have a motion to approve? Carrie Lynn, seconded by Ms. Brizon. All in favor? Thank you. And a motion, please, to accept the minutes of the meeting of March 18th. Ben Grant, moved, seconded by Ron Simonton. Sorry? I believe he was at the meeting. Were you not?
Yeah.
And Ron Simonton?
Just a comment on, Madam Chair, on the adoption of the minutes for the previous meeting. I missed it as a counselor. I don't think should be lay member.
Thank you. You don't want to be a counselor?
Yes. See you through the time.
Thank you, Scott. All in favor? Thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared? Seeing none, we'll move to the review of the public notice requirements by the PAC Secretary.
Thank you. Public notice was advertised in the Standard Freeholder on March 23rd, and it covered the two items that we're going to discuss tonight. The first item deals with the comprehensive housekeeping to our zoning bylaw, which is 1969 as amended. And the second application is going to concern the conversion of the Knox City Center condominium application located at 108 2nd Street East. And I would ask Carl to come forth and explain the housekeeping.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of PAC. So tonight, our first item is our housekeeping exercise. For you who are not familiar with our housekeeping exercise, it's a chance for the planning division or the municipality to make changes to our 1969 zoning bylaw to make it a little bit more current and relevant. As you're all aware, our city's official plan was approved last year, and we're mandated to produce a new zoning bylaw within 3 years. That should start hopefully in the next month or two. So the two items we'll be exploring tonight. The first one is a textual modification to provision 01224, specifically the locational criteria for medical marijuana production facilities. And secondly, the Window Visions development located on 14th and 11th Street West. And that would be for an correction. So just to give you a little bit of background on medical marijuana production facilities, back in 2015, City of Cornwall passed a bylaw that regulated medical marijuana production facilities and allowed them to be located in the city's business park. In the report, you'll see there's a schedule that's attached to the bylaw which highlights the area in question. In 2018, in October, we all know marijuana was legalized, and federal legislation, licensing regulations changed. They introduced the Cannabis Act and the cannabis regulations. So we're looking at modifying the definition to medical marijuana production facility to be consistent with the federal legislation, and secondly, to adjust the actual bylaw. And on the next slide, we'll just take a look at some of the items. It's more in depth in the report, but it just identifies the sections in the definition, the definition in the definition section, so medical marijuana production facility. We'd like to bring it to cannabis production facility, and as you can see in the far right, sorry, let me get the... So we're looking at replacing it with a cannabis production and processing facility. Makes it more general, more generic, and it opens it up. It's not specific to the medical production facilities, right? So the new, from what I understand, is that the new licensing regulations now, they have subcategories. So it doesn't matter if it's for medical purpose, if it's for recreational purposes. They have specific licensing criteria that would have to be followed. So we're on next. So here is the schedule. As in 2015, we're going to attach it with the modifications if approved. The area in question is not going to change, and it will remain within the city's business park. So for the second item, this is a mapping correction. Sometimes we find anomalies or errors. Back in 2000, we proceeded with a mapping exercise which highlighted and identified all the land uses within the city. Sometimes, time to time, we'll see that the lines weren't adjusted accordingly with the old zoning plates, the paper back pages. So the property is designated general commercial. It is located along a commercial corridor along Pitt Street and 11th at the corner, and we'll just go along. So here's the property located right here. So to the south, you have the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. You have the Choice Properties Development, where the Independent is. You have some home-based mixed-use residential/commercial uses here. You have Mr. Turcotte's foot clinic there, and Spine Care Plus by Dr. Leger. Go next. So this is the old 1985 zoning plate that I was referring to before. So where that little red dot is, it used to be located in the commercial 51 zone. The OP designation is GC. The previous official plan was GC. The current is GC, so there's no changes there. Go ahead. So this is the property in question. The operation takes place in the accessory structure in the rear yard. Next. And here are just some shots looking down Pitt Street to the south and to the north. So the proposed changes to marijuana provisions will bring the zoning bylaw in line with federal legislation and licensing regulations, and applying the commercial 51 zoning to the limited vision sites will bring it back in conformity with the general commercial official plan designation. So therefore, we're supportive of the proposed modifications as presented tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. So now we'll have questions for clarification from PAC, and then we'll invite the public to ask questions for clarification if they wish, and then we'll come back to PAC for discussion and motions. So initially, does PAC have any questions? Mr. Symington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has to do with the cannabis facility. On the more detailed requirements or items for consideration, it states that no two CPPF uses shall be located within 150 meters of each other. Does this mean that one company can't have two buildings on their own lot? Or are you talking about you want different companies separated?
Through you, Madam Chair. It's a buffer, it's a separation distance, so 150 meters from each production facility within the park.
Okay, so just the interpretation, I guess I was thinking we're talking about a building use here, and if we want to expand and build another building, it would be within 150 meters.
Is it one established, and then 2 years down the line another one wanted to establish, they would have to be 150 meters separated from each other. So I guess in essence, if one were to establish and another one established within, we'll say 160 meters away, and there was a land assembly on either one of them, and they were to proceed with an addition, they'd probably have a difficult time meeting that criteria.
But Company A could build a second building on their own property.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if they adhere to federal legislation.
Yeah. The other, just more of a comment, it also says that this can't be conducted in a private dwelling. I'm just wondering if it would make sense to put a clause in the home occupation section of the zoning bylaw excluding this use as a permitted home occupation. It's sort of a double whammy where you get them one way or the other way.
Sure, we can look at that.
Are there any other questions? Mr. McIntosh?
The production facility, is possible they could establish a retail outlet in that production facility?
Through you, Madam Chair. As per federal licensing regulations, I believe a small component would be permitted. But again, they would have to adhere to federal requirements.
Any other questions from PAC? Seeing none, I'll invite the public to ask questions. Are there any questions from the public? Does anyone in the public wish to ask a question? Seeing none, then we'll come back to PAC. And at this point, PAC, you can make recommendations and discuss and debate the issue, or simply move the recommendation that's in the agenda. Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move the recommendation, if I can.
Seconded by Glenn Grant. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you.
The second application is going to discuss now is the condominium conversion.
So we received an application from Knox City Centre Inc. To propose to proceed with a condominium conversion of the existing mixed-use building located at the corner of Sydney and 2nd Street. At this time, Knox City Centre Inc. has no intention to sell any of the units or residential, any of the commercial units at all. Currently, the development obtained site plan approval in 2013, subsequently obtained a permit, their permits in 2014 and started construction. It is important to note that Knox City Centre was approved under HOTC Program 1, Rehabilitation and Redevelopment Grant as a condominium project back in 2014. Yeah, so around 2013, 2014. The tax increment grant was based on a residential rate being condominium, not the multi-residential rate being apartments. So the 7-story building sits on a 1-acre parcel. It was created via land assembly. The mixed-use building consists of 4 ground commercial units, 36 residential units being a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom. They have 59 surface parking on site. So here's the property that I think we're all familiar with. It is currently designated business district, and it is located in the central business district zone, which does allow for apartment buildings and mixed-use developments. So here's a picture of the site looking at it from across the street from Sydney Street and 2nd. It is completely developed now. And here is the proposed draft plan survey, which shows all the common external elements of the site plan. It was prepared by OLS Kim Adams, Ontario Land Surveyor Kim Adams. Ahead. So here's an overview of the parking. So as I mentioned before, they do have 59 on-site parking, which lends well to the residential and commercial uses within the building. There is no, sorry. So I don't know if you are aware, but there is no subterranean parking, and it is all above grade. So here's just some of the abutting lands. So we have low-intensive office space to the west. We have high-intensive commercial office building to the east. We have the municipal library and central public and Service Ontario directly to the north. And here is just taking a look down 2nd Street and south of Sydney Street from the development. So part of our evaluation, there are specific policies, and I thought it would be appropriate to bring the two most important ones just to discuss as part of this presentation, the vacancy rates. So our policies indicate that we shouldn't be accepting condominium applications if we have a vacancy rate of less than 3%. Currently, Cornwall sits at 4.2% as per CMHC data, which is very healthy. And a second policy, which is a new one, as part of our new official plan, is that before you didn't require a sign-off from tenants, now you require 75% in order to be able to proceed with an application. As indicated in the report, they did obtain 91%. So out of the 36, there was 1 vacancy, and there were 4 that opted not to take a position on the proposal, from my understanding from the discussion with the solicitor. So part of the evaluation process, typically you'd have to submit building audit condition assessment audits, phase 1 environmentals. All that was taken care of during the site plan process, and in order to get your building permit for the environmental, it was submitted and approved at that time. As you can see in the report, the chief building official did sign off on all the architectural and engineering reports that were provided in order to get his final approval. Mr. Goddard did fulfill his commitments in respects to finalizing all the permits, which there's nothing outstanding anymore. And it was closed in 2016. So the owner and his legal counsel did hold a public information session with all the residents in September of 2018. They met with them to discuss the condominium conversion process and specifics of the RTA, or the Residential Tenancy Act, which is, if you refer to the report, there's an abundance of information in there regarding the RTA. So as it stands, since our public notice, we haven't received any inquiries from the public or the tenants, and the planning division is of the opinion of condominium conversion as proposed is appropriate, and we're supportive of.
So at this point, if PAC has any questions, we'll entertain them now, or rather, perhaps the proponent would like to add to Mr. Doyle's remarks, or his legal counsel. Mr. Gatien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to re-emphasize with regard to the points that were made by Mr. Doyle, the information session you had with the tenants. We were very careful in explaining to them they actually have quite a few rights under the RTA, and actually have better protection than we would for renting a residential home. When there's a conversion, in effect, they were adopted for life, as long as they want to stay there, even if the unit is sold to a third party. That third party inherits them and cannot terminate the tenancy. At the time of conversion, anybody who's there at the time of conversion basically enjoys much better protection than they would in any other circumstance. And that's provincial legislation. They can't even contract out of it. The province basically prevents anybody from being coerced or being pressured to do anything along those lines. So they're fully protected. It's not the intention right now to sell, but even if the intention did change, nothing would change in the provincial legislation, and they'll be fully protected. I think that's important for the PAC to be aware of. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, but as you got it from the high percentage of people who did spend the time, and we went through a similar exercise with the property on Montreal Road, and I think since it was converted, no complaints have been made. Everybody was treated fairly with respect and treated like members of the family and everything.
Very good. So we have questions from Councillors Grant, McIntosh, and Ms. Buzo, and Councillor Gardner. So, Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Morris. See, what I was wondering, if Morris is currently living in that, he's an apartment owner, and I purchased that condo. Now, is the relationship directly he and I, and
You're now the landlord? Yes.
and the owner of the, has nothing to do with it?
Correct, but in effect, he will enjoy the same rights as he enjoys under the RTA, no matter who the owner is. Nothing will change.
Okay. Someone asked me that question.
Yeah.
The only thing bothers me about these conversions is we lose tax dollars.
Well, the other way to look at it as well, and I know...
Oh, now you're talking like a politician.
Well, part of this is related as well to financing, and when we refinance a property, would otherwise be going, when it's residential, multi-residential, it's more expensive to borrow the money. Basically, the money is going to Toronto, and here you've got a developer who's spent a lot of money within the city of Cornwall, is about to undertake another expansion of Woodvale Terrace, and has shown through his track record that was going back into the community, so it's money that would otherwise fly off to Toronto, is going to stay here.
There's always another side to it.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh?
Sure looks better than an empty lot, I'll tell you that. The intention is not to sell, but as units become vacant, somebody moves out or passes on, would that be sold, or would it continue to rent?
They would continue to rent. So basically, as I say, the current intention is really to take advantage of the opportunity to save money on interest and taxes. But essentially, when something is sold in a condominium project that's been converted, it's treated differently than something that was condominium right from the beginning. And the RTA is very, very protective of tenants in those situations.
Okay. But there is somewhere down the road you must be thinking that,
retirement or things change. Yes, it could happen. But let's say the RTA is, I can't imagine a circumstance where the province would withdraw existing rights in this type of situation. Politically, I don't see it happening.
Thanks. Thank you. Ms. Buzo? Thank you. Hello.
My question is a simple one. The tenants that are currently living in there, is this going to, the results of this, is it going to be brought back to them and explain their rights to them so they all completely understand?
We will make a point of re-explaining it to them. But, as you can see, as I mentioned, from the high level of adoption of this, we made the effort as well when we converted on Montreal Road. And not one single person showed up to object at that time, not one single person has objected now, because we've done that education process. It takes effort, but I think the tenants appreciate being made to feel like they're in the loop. This isn't just enforced on them.
I guess my worry was just that I would hope that these tenants are not going to think that if this gets passed and they read about it or hear about it on social media or in the news, that they think, oh my God, I'm going to have to get out of here, or...
But you bring up a good point, and actually it's a good suggestion, and we will do that, I think, to, once it's approved, re-educate them, bring it forward, so it doesn't give rise to any, let's say, speculative, wonder if, no, nothing's changed, and I think reassuring them is a very good idea.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
I was on council when they approved this building initially, and part of the approval depended on some square footage for commercial, right? And I'm wondering if this changes anything.
No, the ground floor will remain commercial.
Remains commercial.
Actually, eventually those commercial condo units will also be sold to the businesses that are there. If they prefer to stay as tenant, they can stay as a tenant. If they wanted to buy the unit, they could do so in a way anchor their business long term. Gives them a certain flexibility.
Yeah, that's where I was.
It always preserves its character as a condominium, but the ground floor will stay commercial.
Yeah, so what I was looking at is whether they could buy it or whether it would turn into another condo. It's commercial. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And does PAC have any questions of staff or of Mr. Gatian?
I have a few questions for Mr. Doyle. I support this. I don't have any issue with it, but my math says it's 88%, not 91. I just want to understand how that, sorry, the 91%, 31 into 35. It's irrelevant to this application, but to me it's 88%. But
did you take 36 or 35?
35.
35 units?
Yeah.
So 31 divided by 35 is what?
80.
80?
88%.
88%?
It doesn't matter today. I'm just curious if I missed something there.
Yeah. Sorry,
If it was 76, it would be an issue. My other question is, it states in our in the document here, the owner has no intention to sell, et cetera. Is that just for our information? It seems irrelevant to the decision. Once we make the decision, they can sell or not sell. So why would that factor into?
Just in past cases, council, they wanted to know the intent of the proponent at the time of application.
Okay.
So similar to.
But once we pass this, it doesn't matter. They can sell. They can. I understand. Thank you.
I agree with that, Councillor. It is more for context to understand the situation, but
You're free to do what you like after that.
Are there any other questions?
thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Okay, and well, perhaps the public might have some questions for you. Would anybody in the public like to ask some questions? Would anybody in the public like to ask some questions? Do the members of the public have questions? Seeing none, we'll come back to PAC for a recommendation and discussion, debate, whatever. Mr. Gardner?
I recommend that we approve it.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Grant. Are there questions or discussion points? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. Well done. And good luck, Mr. Godard. Well done to you. Now,
We're now going to hear from Dana McLean, and she has, I believe, 4 CPAC applications.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so our first application this evening is under the Heart of the City program. It's a new application for 2019. It's 29 2nd Street East. This application has received funding in the past, but this is a new owner that is looking to purchase this location. So when there is funds that have not been used through the program, they are still able to apply for the remaining funding. Dr. Hussain is currently located in leasing space at the town square and is looking to purchase his own property and move his medical offices to this facility. So he will be doing extensive renovations on the first floor, so he will need to provide drawings, architect, engineer drawings for building permits. So he's applying for the project design grant at this time. These are the funds remaining in that application that he would be eligible to apply for. We did, upon CPAG's review of it, there was a few things that they wanted to see corrected at the time. So there is damage to one of the front areas. If you want to just flip right here. So this was a new facade that was put on by the previous owner. Unfortunately, this driveway is quite narrow. I have driven in there myself, in and out both sides. You just fit. So depending on the size of your vehicle, there has been damage here in the past. So we've asked that be corrected as part of the renovations to the interior of the project. And then also at the rear, there is some brush adjacent to the city's parking lot at a fence line that we'd like to see cleaned up as well. So, okay, and this is interior shot. So this is pretty much gutted to what it was before. So in there previously was the Seaway News operation. Okay. The next application, so that is the one page that I've provided to you at your desk as well. There was the summary of it was missing. So these are two properties, 245 and 249 Pitt Street, and owned by the same two people, and they would be looking to demolish this property and possibly put in a 5-story building. Okay, next. So at this point, they are going under engaging their consultants for architectural and engineered plans in order to do this. They were looking at proposing underground parking. They looked at 2 floors of commercial, 3 floors, perhaps a boutique hotel or possible condominiums at this, so they will explore those with their consultants and come back. So we have put a condition in here in order for them to receive that grant. They would have to do their submission for the building permit at that point. So again, and they would also be eligible to apply for municipal planning fees in case, well, they would get their building permits if there was any minor variances and so forth. Site plan would be required, so that's in the future as well. Next slide. So these are the 2 buildings that we're talking about. This one we refer to as the old Bell building. Historically, Bell was in there previous. This is JG Shoes, for those of us who are a little bit older. It also became, it was called Street Chic. It was a retail store, next to it. So those are the 2 buildings that we're talking about. Note here that total cyclery, there is a shared wall on here, so we did discuss the questions with once this building is removed, who's responsible for the repairs on this. It is a discussion between the 2 owners because it is private property. What we've seen done in the past for Oasis, which was right next to the Bourgon site at Pitt and 2nd, the owners of Oasis, used the Heart of the City funding as their share. So they received a grant funding for the facade of theirs, and then Bourgon came in with half of the funding for them as well. So we have done something similar in the past, and again, actually, you want to go to the next slide? That's not going to show it, but for those of you not familiar, where Kings and Little Ones is the creation of George Astley Lane. We took down a building, the city removed that building, and we did some repairs with the owners of that building as well, and cost sharing. So this is the rear of the Bell building. It is really quite large. It goes almost out all the way to the rear laneway. There is an entrance back here that they would be able to drive in and possibly create underground parking in this area. Next slide. And then this is the back of JG Shoes, and then Total Cyclery that's in there right now. And you can see that everything is joined up. So, okay. Oh, yeah, so go back just, yeah, we talked about the design. So it was $7,500 for that grant.
Yes, Mr. Henry?
Just a question, Madam Chair, to you, Mr. King. By insisting on them having to build permits, like maybe I'll simplify. Is there a way of ensuring that they don't just knock it down and leave a big empty lot? Because I think while those buildings are certainly, their day is over, we have an awful lot of empty holes downtown, and it would be a shame to see another empty hole as in light of what we have in the corner of Pitt and 2nd amongst others.
We can't, we can withhold the funding, and that's what we've essentially tried to do. So there won't be any funding moving forward unless they submit for the building permit. So a building permit, let's say of a $2 million project, 5-story, best guess estimate would be quite substantial. So they would have to pay for those fees up front. So if they're spending $50,000 in permit fees for this building, we would hope that they are going to be moving forward because there's no way for them to get that money back. If they're applying through the program, yes, they're eligible for it, but we have the structure so that they don't get those funds back unless it's built, unless they have complete final inspection. So they don't get any of that funding back until it actually happens.
Technically speaking,
they could knock it down.
They could apply, deal the building permit, get the $7,500 that you're talking about, flatten it and then say, we changed the name.
But it's not likely if they've spent the money on the permit.
Sure, you'd think that if you're gonna
Yeah.
pony up that much money, although is there anything, there's nothing stopping them technically, however, from knocking it all down and then selling it as a vacant lot.
Correct, correct.
That's all.
It is unfortunate that we do.
It is what it is. I mean, once you do what you do, you're allowed to do it. I'm just curious.
We do have the scenario at Pittman Second where, yes, they've paid for the permit, the foundation is in the ground, and unfortunately, they haven't been successful at this point in securing a tenant in order to move forward. So, in this instance, they're proposing 2 floors of commercial and then residential or a boutique hotel. If they were moving in that direction, you would have to get 75%, for example, in sales for the condos before you would get your funding from your financial lender. So those things have to fall into place too. Not necessarily for the commercial tenants, they could own the commercial condos themselves and then lease them out. So there's quite a few different scenarios.
Councillor Gardner and then McIntosh.
Oh, there goes another heritage building. But if you're talking about hotel downtown, that's gonna fit well with the Arts and Culture Center, because that'll bring people there and people that will stay overnight, so I certainly wanna approve that.
Thank you. And Councillor McIntosh.
Who owns the laneway running behind?
So the laneway is owned by 25 Second Street East, which we refer to as the old Jade Garden, for those of us that are familiar with that. So I have been in contact with the owner of that laneway over many years because of its situation. And they are ready to move forward with Millions this spring to do some repairs to that laneway. It will not be paved fully. Engineering is concerned about drainage at this point. So that laneway, we're hoping, will be purchased by these people at the time of construction.
Interesting why the Jade Gardens ended up with that.
It was the way, because it was a farmland and how that property ended up getting severed off over history, and that's how it worked out. Not that she really wants that land. Yes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When the demolition permit is applied for, is it not possible that certain conditions can be put in place to protect the abutting owner, so he's not left there with a blue tarp hanging on the side of his building for 6 months until something's resolved?
I'm not 100% certain. I know there was a situation with Oasis and Burgo in the past. Again, this is private property. There would be some requirements, I believe, under the building code to ensure the safety and the integrity of that wall. But again, that would also bear on the property owner because it is his wall, although it is shared. So that would definitely be something to be reviewed at the time of permit by the chief building official. In this case, they have been in discussion preliminary with planning. We would definitely suggest that they meet with planning and as well as building and engineering at some point for preliminary discussions before they start proposing their site plan, and usually those are highly recommended, and they having their consultants there as well.
Thank you.
And Ms. Brizo.
So I just have a quick question about the zoning. So what is it currently zoned right there?
It's CBD, so Commercial Business District. It's one of our most generous zoning areas that allow
Just because
for.
you had talked about possibly apartments or a hotel, and I'm just like, okay.
Right.
So it's got some sort of mixed use there.
Right. Central Business District allows for the most, similar to down in Le Village for the commercial 70 zone. We also have 50% reductions for parking, except if it is residential. You still have to provide the one spot per unit type of idea, so.
If I may, I just want to make a comment, just to build on Mr. Sivington's comments. We ran into a situation where a shared wall, or not really quite a shared wall, pit and second, and that empty lot, and the building beside it, there were commotions and arguments, and brought to this table were not preparing to let the proponent know that if you damage a wall, you're going to be responsible for it. We argued and fought that here, I don't know how long. So I would like to see something put in place that will protect us from that kind of happening again. I think you recall how it went too.
Yes, it was quite an argument, so.
Yeah, so I would like to get away from that if it's possible.
Agreed.
Moving on then.
Okay, so the next application is 108 Pitt Street, and this is Life's Little Pleasures. So this is an addendum application. She's received funding from the program before, and now she's coming back, if you want to flip, for, under the Building Restoration and Improvement Program, the interest-free loan portion for approximately $3,500. She has an old boiler system that has to be replaced and upgraded and higher efficiency. One of the things that we look at for that type of replacement, because we do feel it is a building maintenance item. So in her case, there's asbestos involved. So we want to make sure that that's done correctly, the removal, the abatement, all of the paperwork that is associated with that. So we will offer, when people come to us and they don't need further renovations, as you can see from other pictures, her building is in good condition. If they're coming for just the roof or some type of a heating system, we look at the interest-free loan only. We're not recommending any grant here. So under the discretionary municipal tipping fees, we do have a program that we can accept asbestos at the landfill site. It is at a higher cost in order to do that, but that's why we've included that as part of the program. Next. So this is Life's Little Pleasures, if you recall that building on Pitt Street. So she's done her roof. I mean, if you've been in the store, it's always very nice. She did some lighting addition on the front and repainted the front of the building as well. And so the last application is a brownfield application. It's an addendum for 1200 2nd Street West. I wanted to give you a wider shot of this building. So this is what we know as Riverdale Terrace. And they also own the parking area across the street where they took down the Sunset Motel. And then this is the area that they're looking at putting their new addition. So Riverdale Terrace was under the brownfield program. There was remediation done on the site, and they did receive a tax increment grant for this property to the amount of approximately $670,000. They received their last tax increment grant reimbursement last year, which was in year 6. So we're allowing them, because the tax increment grant or the program is over a 10-year period. We've seen other applications, such as where the Shoppers Drug Mart is, for example. That's the easiest one to describe, the tax increment grant program. They don't always do a full build-out. They don't always have their anchor tenants. They provide us a general site plan of what they're proposing. The Shoppers Drug Mart was built, then where Bulk Barn is, and then they saw other buildings to the rear where Boston Pizza is, and there's also another unit space available to north of Boston Pizza. So over that 10-year period, and Starbucks is an example, Starbucks came in. So as they do these properties, add these little areas on, they can come back for municipal fees and development charges, that type of idea. So that's what we're looking at here for Riverdale Terrace. They still have 4 years to go with which to apply for funding for their program. I would believe this would be the last step. So the development charges is eligible under Program 1, and that was part of the bylaw when we approved the development charges for the city, that under the Brownfields program, it would be eligible under that. So that isn't quite an exact number. I believe when the calculation was done, they did the 2018 fee schedule. It will change slightly, maybe $1,000 or $2 on that. So I will have a correct number whenever it does, if you're recommending it to council. Then the municipal planning and development fees grant, that's your building permit, your site plan application, as well as a minor variance in there. So at each of these stages, when site plan is approved and the agreement is signed, we receive the letter of credit, they can be then reimbursed for that portion of the program. When the Committee of Adjustments approves the minor variance, you wait the 20-day appeal period, then they're eligible to get reimbursement for that. For the building permit, for example, you only get that upon completion of the building with final inspection in place. And the new assessment for this, when I was speaking with Mr. Goddard, if you've driven by the property, it's already fenced off. Just go to a couple of the shots. So this is the proposed site plan that I've included in your package. There is a shed there now, if you're familiar with it. Go to the next slide. So there's the shed. This will be demolished. They've applied for the demolition permit for that. And that'll be the connection to the new building. So that's where the hallway would be. Go back to the previous. So this is a proposed 3-story building with underground parking. It'll change their parking layout as well along here. So parking will be at the rear and then around the building. And then there'll be underground parking here. And there'll be 3 floors. They will have individual suite units. And then there would also be more for assisted living on the 2nd floor where you need full nursing care. That's what he's proposing. And next slide, just again to give you more of a closer shot of what it looks like now. And I did see Mr. Goddard's booth, or Riverdale Terrace booth, at the spring home show, and they had a lot of interest. So they've already started accumulating a waiting list for the building. And that's all.
Councilors Gardner, Harrington, and McIntosh.
Well, a couple of questions. Number one, when we built the Benson Center, we had to deal with the Mohawks about the Sassanee, find out if there were any burial grounds in that area on that land.
I didn't.
So I'm just wondering whether we would have to do that again. Because we're closer than the Benson Center.
Right, if you can go back to the previous slide. No, yeah, right here. So this is the property here, and then he would have provided a site plan for this at the time of the construction, and any requirements under that, any applicable law that would have been required would have been for this complete site, even though he's now proposing putting a building here. I would think those studies would already be completed for the complete site, because this is the site plan that was prepared for. And then, as you may be aware, this is Seaway lands to the south of the property.
That was my next question. I mean, it abuts the Seaway land, so we could build along that stretch as long as we're farther away. I'm talking about the empty lots on the way down. We could build there as long as we're the proper distance away from the Seaway lands.
What do you mean we? You mean the city as in we, or?
The city could allow people to build along that stretch where there's empty property, as long as we're away from the Seaway lands. Seaway lands would be here.
Okay, go back up to my first shot of this, so it's a couple slides forward. Right one, yeah, right there. So here's the river right here,
yeah.
Right? This is all Seaway land property. And I believe, I'm not quite sure who this neighbor is, if it's the factory, or it is the factory. Mm-hmm. So yes, we can permit people to build here, and anything that's privately owned. If it's owned by the Seaway, it would have to go through that process of getting brought down to the offer to the province, the municipality, and then privately.
I look at that red line, the bottom one.
This one.
Looking at it.
Yes. That's his property limit.
How short line has come into, if you straighten that line out, short line is on Seaway property.
No, I wouldn't believe that they are. This property line when this was built, would be owned by Shoreline. It doesn't have to be a straight line right across for the Seaway lands. It can be jagged.
I just,
Because we have Seaway lands, as you can see right here, adjacent to, that's owned by the Seaway, and it's right to the street.
that's weird. I'm sorry, but that's, I don't understand why we can't develop that area.
Well, hopefully it will come to that in the future.
Anyway, thanks.
Councillor Harrington?
Harrington, Hollingsworth, it's always, I've been called worse in my day.
I'm sorry.
mostly
I've been
students.
doing this all night, haven't
Sure, it's no big deal. I'm a teacher, trust me.
I just thought his nameplate was spelt wrong.
Harrington, that way, that, incognito, if I get a phone call, I'll refer to Councillor Harrington. That being said, thank you, Madam Chair. One quick question, Ms. McLean, and I don't know if you said it or not, I missed it. Does he have a timeline as to when he thinks this, assuming everything goes according to Hoyle, does he have a timeline when he thinks this will be finished?
He's thinking end of November. I think that's a little bit aggressive,
Seems
but
awfully aggressive to
JC, Mr. Goddard, I don't put anything past him. When he's ready to go, he's ready to go. Like I mentioned, he has submitted for permit. The fence is up. I'm sure once the half loads come off the streets, he's going to be ready to go. He's a very good builder, and he's proven himself time and again within the city, the projects that he's done. That's what he's looking for, and that's why I did mention, and I talked with Brad Maloney, our municipal assessor, when this would come into play. So even if he started to occupy in December, I don't think we would receive a supplemental tax on that. It would probably still be at the construction phase, almost final. MPAC would have to go in and fully assess. That's why I mentioned on the first page that assessment would happen in 2020. So you're not looking at any of these funds actually flowing out until 2020, and Brad would put the tax increment grant portion in his budget for 2020. We would plan for that.
Now, that being said, a supplemental question, you can start renting now before MPAC shows up and does the career.
He can, once he has occupancy and a final inspection for the building permit, yes. Now, I by no means know how the municipal assessment works 100%. Brad, I could come back with that answer for you. But could they, if they only assessed it 6 months down the road, could they backtrack for that month of December? That is a possibility.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
And Councillor McIntosh?
One point, Councillor Gardner brought up, the Seaway Authority owned that property where Riverdale Terrace is now. The Healy family bought that about 10 years ago. And, I believe Jack McGaughy made the same deal where Shortline is. That's how it became privately owned. And John Cleary bought some lots farther down. Anyway, when they dug up the soil first, this is the second one at the brownfield.
It is.
I'm just wondering, curious why they didn't go over the whole property, why just one where they're just gonna build?
I wouldn't expect them to have to do any remediation
Not
in
there.
here.
Okay.
It will, when they dig, I would think they're expecting it to be clean as
Okay.
well. They will just be removing the soil for the foundation. It would be normal anyway.
Yeah.
So they do have the record of
So
site condition on the full site.
There's another development called the Benson Center, didn't have any problems either, but they started digging, but, you never know where you're gonna find it.
The truth is always in digging.
Yes.
And Councillor Bergeron?
Always appreciate the history lessons while here. Ms. McLean, could you explain maybe the grants, where that money actually comes from, in a little more detail, and how it's given to them?
So the Program 1 tax increment grant, where they're applying to get reimbursement for their development charges, that actually comes from the taxes that they pay to the city on the property, and then it's reimbursed to them. So they have to pay it in full, and then we reimburse the amount that's allotted to them. So for example, I should pull out the file. So they had $670,000 in tax increment grant for the initial property. That means that they were trying to recoup 100% of the remediation costs. So it took 6 years, for example, to pay them out that amount. So we would have been receiving taxes in excess of $100,000 each year, and then whatever was rebated to them, they would have had a portion of that. So the idea is this new building is creating assessment and new taxes. That's why we offer the incentive to get it back, because once that 10-year period is over, or 6 in this case, we are now seeing the full taxes come to the city for this development instead of being a vacant piece of property.
So it's coming out of taxes they've already paid.
Correct. So what we do is we budget for that as part of it, and it's part of your overall budget. Brad Maloney puts an amount in there, and you see what's taken out of the tax increment grant for that. But again, new taxes have already been put in. So, for example, he will be paying over $100,000 still on Riverdale Terrace. You'll have a new building that'll be assessed in excess of $5 million. The construction value of it that he's submitted for is $5 million. So that will be quite substantial as well. And you'll be paying out, rebating $31,000, let's say in 2020. But you'll be collecting $150 plus.
So the development fees would not have been included in the previous version of this building, correct?
Correct. Development charges are new.
Development charges are new, but they're getting a development fees grant. Are those related?
No, in the sense that they are for building permits, minor variance, or site plan control. So that is separate. That grant money comes from the Brownfield Reserve. So this year, for example, you included in your budget to allow for the Brownfield Reserve to receive $400,000 of the new assessment that has come as a result of this Brownfield program. So over the 10 years, especially if it's a commercial project, one easy, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the Shoppers Drug Mart site, that is a fully commercial site. So in the old program, we rated that over a 10-year period on a defining scale. So in year 1 and 2, they got back 80% of the increment difference of the property. So let's say the taxes on it before were $20,000, the taxes on it now are over $100,000, the incremental difference is $80,000, they got 80% of that amount. That 20% was an amount to fund back into the Brownfield Reserve in order to help replenish this. After the 10 years is over, the city gets all of the money from the new taxes into their own bottom line.
It's very clear, thank you.
Is it? No.
No, like that's
Okay.
that is exactly the kind of answer I always want when I ask a question. I'm not kidding. That is perfect.
And Mr. Symington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking at the site plan, they have on here total parking spaces of 81. This new addition, they're adding, pretty small writing here, but just trying to see the number of units, 89 suites. I'm not quite certain what the ratio of parking spaces per suite in a senior's residence, but there's nothing shown on here but the lot across the road. Is there a chance that that's going to be for overflow parking? And if so, should it not form part of the site plan?
Not at this point. I believe Mr. Goddard is proposing another residential type unit for seniors across the street that would be more of a self-sufficient unit, but maybe a one-bedroom or bachelor style with a full kitchen. I think he is considering, you're moving across the street, you're in a self-sufficient unit. When you need retirement, you're looking at just moving right across the street. And when you need assisted living, then you're gonna go to his
One-stop shopping.
other unit.
Funeral home next door.
I'm
As long as
not.
he doesn't put a graveyard beside it.
On the
Funeral home, then graveyard.
There is a underground parking here. I'm sure the parking calculation would be including those underground spots as well. And if I can, Madam Chair, defer to Mr. Doyle, because he would know the parking
There's
requirements.
18 underground, according to the site plan.
There's adequate, there is adequate parking for the residents and staff.
Okay, thank you.
Currently, right now, there is sometimes some overflow on the education parcel for staff there. They typically have between 8 to 10 cars. They're parked during the day. With the new addition and the reconfiguration of parking south and to the west of the property with the subterranean parking, there's going to be that footprint.
Well, on Thursdays, when they have the provost meetings there, that lot across the street is completely full as well.
Okay, well, I have Mr. Bennett next, so, and then, did you want to?
I just wanted to qualify that with respect to the seniors units, there's different variations in the zone, so it's 1 per 4 beds. So although you might see so many units, it's not 1 per bed, so to speak, so that helps as well.
Okay, so, Councillor Bennett?
Thank you, through you. I can understand giving the grants for the first building because you had to remediate the land. But I think you just said that you don't have to do any remediation for the other parts. I'm just wondering why this qualifies for another grant.
So similarly, when Starbucks moved to the Shoppers Drug Mart site, all the remediation is done. So when they look at demolishing the building, like Brookshire Motors and CarStar was there, they do all of the remediation at the same time. They have an estimated value that they come present to the committee and to council of, I think it was approximately $697,000 in remediation costs, and we know what the tax increment grant is.
Right.
Again, they don't fully build out within that time period, but they have that 10-year window in order to do that. So although there's no remediation required, and there wouldn't have been any remediation for the Starbucks either, they can still apply through the program for these other grants that we offer. And since development charges has only been in place for a year or two, it is eligible under the Brownfield program, so that's why he's applying for it.
Thank you.
And I think, Ms. Brizon, did you?
Yeah, I just have a question. I am fairly new to this process, so I just want to clarify something. Whenever these come into us, Dana, you give them to us in a batch like you just did. And we always vote on them as a group. Is that normal practice? Or like if we agreed with one and didn't agree with one or had questions about one, or is that option always available to this committee?
Absolutely. So you can vote on them individually. You can vote on them 3 if you wanted to separate this one, for example, and you wanted to have a recorded vote or for whatever reason, or you wanted to add conditions specifically to this one. That is definitely up to yourself. You have an option to vote for each one separately.
Thank you.
And I've got a question, if you don't mind going back to the picture, the street view, aerial view? No,
Or the larger one.
So the lot across the street.
That. So this lot?
Yes. I'm surprised with the population that we have in Riverdale Terrace, and a restaurant and a bar across the street. Why hasn't been a demand for any kind of traffic control there, or maybe there has been?
I believe at the time of site plan, that would have been an issue, so the traffic engineer would have looked at that if there was a requirement for signaling,
yeah.
Possibly pedestrian signal. They have had some times where they have a little outing across the street to the ice cream parlor, and they do notify city police, and the city police go to assist them as they walk across. So I don't think it's been necessary because it hasn't happened, but it would be reviewed by the city engineer, traffic engineer.
I can see it being something that might have to happen to increase the population. So, are you ready to vote then? Somebody want to move all of these together? Councillor DePel, seconded by Councillor Bennett. All in favor? Thank you. And an information?
We've just attached in the back of the your package tonight a meeting procedure which we've tried to put together. I've just noticed that it doesn't exactly mimic the agenda, so I might give you another one next month as well, because there's a little bit of the disclosure of interest should come after the adoption of the agenda, so we'll just amend that. With respect to the meeting in May, we do not have any public meeting items at this point. We have until next Wednesday for us to determine whether or not there will be a May PAC, but as it stands right now, there may not be one.
May not be one?
May not be one.
Good pun.
So we'll wait to hear. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Wow, I got so many. Councillor Towndale, seconded by Ms. Brizo. All in favor? Thank you. Thank you.
No, what's in it?
Yeah, be careful with that.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so, both my father-in-law and dad lives at Riverdale Terrace. Yeah, my father.